In my profoundly poorly recorded arcade stick video, sorry for that again, I briefly mentioned something called a hitbox, and for those of you who don't know, once arcades started to die towards the end of the 1990s, fighting game players were forced to use the controllers or pads that came with the home consoles, as opposed to the traditional levers and buttons they were used to on arcade cabinets. There were alternatives like importing controllers with the classic levers and buttons on them, or arcade sticks from overseas, made by Hori, or just making something resembling one at home yourself. Both of these were somewhat impractical for most, but it wasn't long before companies like Mad Catz brought authentic Japanese parts to the States with their tournament edition sticks. Other companies soon began getting in on this new market for arcade sticks in the West, especially with the revival of fighting games upon Street Fighter 4's release in 2009. But a year later, in November 2010, a pair of seemingly innocuous tournament attendees emerged with something that caught the eye of other competitors present at Socal Regionals: an arcade stick with no stick at all. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was and still is undoubtedly beloved by the FGC. Its eye-candy visuals for spectators, irrefutable sense of style for competitors, and various memes from within its player base such as "He's so Pringles, where your curly mustache at?" referring to a player's poor blocking ability, saying they break easily like a Pringles chip, as well as, "Yo, you wanna learn how to do an infinite?
Let's start this motherfucker off right! Ow! 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 Drop that shit! What are you doing, motherfucker? Ow! Ow! How's it taste? Keep the rhythm up. If you fuck up the rhythm, the motherfucking combo will drop, motherfucker. Keep that motherfucking shit out. You keep that same motherfucker.
These in-jokes and the showmanship that came with playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2 at a high level cemented the game within the minds of both diehards and casual observers alike, as it became a cherished spectator sport for many, many years, drawing the attention of both Sean and Dustin Huffer, two brothers who sought to earn their place among the best of them that played Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and they slowly became consumed by this grandiose ambition. But the two ran into a problem along their path to greatness. Their dragon punches were coming out inconsistently, a major problem for anyone looking to get better at the game, since anti-airing can not only be an integral part of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but of fighting games in their entirety. As they began to experiment looking for a solution, they eventually came to the idea of replacing the levers on an arcade stick with buttons for each direction. This proved to be just as smooth and efficient, or even found their performance to be better in some cases than their performance on their arcade sticks. Fighting games first found their footing with the release of Street Fighter 2 throughout arcades in 1991. Therefore, many people perceive arcade sticks as the only way to play fighting games, and even playing on a pad was looked down upon around this time, the very peripheral the console comes with out of the box. And like clockwork, bringing these new controllers to competitions earned the sibling duo both looks of ire and intrigue from those repulsed by the fact they would ever defile an arcade stick by adding something so unnatural that defied the tradition of how fighting games were played, and those fascinated by the new take on an already existing controller scheme that most were used to, as well as how this new layout could be beneficial over an arcade stick. The two would be approached by an interviewer with the now dead AngryBananas.com, a video production company with a website covering gaming news and events related to the Southern California area, at Socal Regionals on November 11th, 2010.
Hey guys, this is Angel Cabrera from AngryBananas.com. I'm here at Socal Regionals, and we got Mad Catz and Hori in the house, but guess what? We also got the Hufford brothers with their new line of sticks, Pure Digital. So can you tell me, what's up with these sticks, and why did you want to, make them the way they are?
Basically, we're just trying to beat the system. It's kind of started out as a hobby, but now we're actually, I just decided to switch to it. I've been on it for about a month. But we don't know what to call them because they're not actually sticks. They're just kind of boxes. So these are our boxes. We're making different kinds, kind of messing around with different schemes. This one's kind of the standard one for Street Fighter 4. It's basically the main difference is we got arrow keys, like if you're playing on a keyboard for the directional inputs. And pretty much the only reason you'd want to do this is because the travel time on a joystick is a lot longer than the travel time on these Samwell buttons. So basically you can do your Dragon Punch, your Hadouken at light speed. So we've just been messing around with it, and we actually really love it.
Shortly after SCR, the brothers have been flooded with people requesting to buy these boxes, despite the fact they had essentially been homemade DIY projects the two created in their garage, and that garage quickly became its own assembly line, in Dustin's words, with the two having an entire waitlist of customers. One of the first being Karasa, a player in the Tatsunoko vs. Capcom community, and someone that Dustin remarks as the first person to really light up in get it when they first met at SCR. With no background in engineering or running their own business, Dustin working as a certified court reporter and Sean a professional violinist, both had to learn to go one box at a time, taking pride and precious care in their craft. Shortly after, on December 6, 2010, a video uploaded by a YouTube channel under the name of Hitbox Arcade, titled Hitbox The Basics, was shared across fighting game community online gatherings, such as event hubs and the now defunct SRK or Shoryuken.com, and demand for these boxes, now branded as the Hitbox, quickly grew, meaning their methods of production would have to alongside it. And sometime later on June 27, 2011, a new introduction to the Hitbox was uploaded, now sporting its own logo and branding, and it wasn't long before big names started paying attention to this thing, earliest of which being Rayo, who took devastation using the Hitbox in 2011, despite using a pad earlier that same year at Evolution for the same game, Mortal Kombat 9. But the first real example of the Hitbox having a bigger spotlight shed on it, as well as when it would begin to cause immense controversy, is when Daigo Umehara, Street Fighter legend known for infamous Evo Moment 37 and one of the 5 Japanese fighting game gods, brought a modified Hitbox to Combo Breaker, created by fellow Street Fighter player Yusuke Hoshino, otherwise known as Gafro. Despite competing in arcades for years, Daigo would abandon his arcade stick roots entirely and move to this modified Gafro box. The Hitbox itself in some games have something known as simultaneous opposing cardinal directions, or SOCD cleaning, which prevents two opposite inputs from being inputted at the same time. SOCD cleaning has two modes. If I input both left and right at the same time, it will read as neutral or as if no direction is being pressed at all, known as neutral wins. If I input both right and left at the same time and left comes out, this mode is referred to as last input priority, or the last input wins. The reason proper neutral SOCD cleaning is important is because without it, certain things that are impossible on most arcade sticks or some pads become a reality for Hitbox users, as most games are not designed with the concept of a controller that could input two directions at once in mind. This leads to game-breaking exploits like walking forward and instantly blocking, or buffering charge-based attacks like Guile Sonic Boom while moving as well. In spite of Daigo's Gafro box indeed containing SOCD cleaning, a problem still arose due to the fact he was using the last input priority of SOCD, meaning that holding left and then pressing right would still equal right, allowing for near instantaneous charging on Sonic Booms or charge-based projectiles. On May 24, 2019, the official Capcom Fighters Twitter account would release a statement regarding the Gafra box and leverless controllers in general, reading, quote, "To all Combo Breaker CPT attendees, we have received inquiries about controllers from participating players. However, with the current Capcom Pro Tour rules, the question around the controller's use cannot be answered clearly. While Capcom respects the diversity of the controller, we feel that the use of the controller gives the competition an advantage that does not follow the spirit of the CPT. We, in close consultation with the Combo Breaker tournament organizer, concluded that we cannot accept the use of a controller that does not conform to the Capcom Pro Tour spirit at this event. Also, regardless of the Combo Breaker situation, the rules of the local tournament will be respected for all controllers used in the tournament, as long as the Capcom Pro Tour rules cannot address clearly. Therefore, we ask for the understanding and cooperation of all the participating competitors to follow the rules and decisions established by the tournament organizer. We will continue to consider controller usage rules and potentially revising Capcom Pro Tour rules. However, please understand more information and time is needed in order to make an appropriate decision regarding the use of the controllers in question." End quote. The broken English is their own. A storm quickly erupted with many thinking that the Hitbox was now banned at Combo Breaker, arguably the largest tournament second to Evolution. But shortly after, owner of Combo Breaker, Richard Theher, or Rick the Hadou, clarified that the Hitbox and button controllers are allowed at Combo Breaker, but it's just that Daigo's Hitbox was banned from the Capcom Pro Tour, which had to stop in Combo Breaker. With the community-spanning game of telephone as to why Daigo's Hitbox was banned, heated debates about whether or not the Hitbox was cheating and if it should be banned ensued all across the fighting game community. Though this is the first major instance of the Hitbox sparking widespread controversy, debates regarding its legitimacy are always on and off within the fighting game community, with stray discussions or events here and there fanning the flames of aggressive argumentation, like when many began to notice the considerable amount of players using a Hitbox in the top 8 brackets at Evolution 2022, the biggest fighting game tournament in the world. But Capcom would once again call the Hitbox's competitive integrity into question when on March 29, 2023, Capcom Fighters would tweet a statement saying, "In anticipation of the 2023 season, Capcom has made the decision to update the Capcom Pro Tour rules in relation to leverless controllers. This was done to address consistency and fairness concerns." The new rules on their website read as, quote, The new rule we are putting forth is designed to ensure all leverless controllers operate to a universal standard regardless of make or model at Capcom sanctioned events. With this in mind, we've decided to make the following change. If up and down directions are input at the same time, both inputs must be maintained or both inputs must be rejected. To clarify, if up and down inputs are made simultaneously, the character must not perform a jump or crouch action. And if left and right inputs are made simultaneously, the character must not perform a forward or backward movement action. End quote. Essentially, what Capcom was trying to convey is that the hitbox must use the true neutral setting of SOCD, where inputting both up and down is neutral and inputting both left and right at the same time is neutral as well. The community would once again erupt saying that Capcom had banned the hitbox. This is because by default, the hitbox sends left plus right as neutral, but up plus down is up, meaning that technically, Capcom had banned every hitbox in its factory default state. However, there is a way to change this setting so that left plus right are neutral and up plus down are neutral as well, meaning that there wasn't really much of a reason to be a mass resurgence in the discussion again, aside from correcting misinformation. But this is the most recent instance of mass debate within the community as of the recording of this video, and with all the information we have surrounding the hitbox and leverless controllers, let's ask one simple yet loaded question. Is the hitbox cheating? I believe the main takeaway has been, or at least should be, what is or is not possible on an arcade stick or pad that becomes possible on a hitbox. The hitbox doesn't necessarily come with any potentially unfair innate advantages over an arcade stick or pad, other than its significantly faster return to neutral time, but that advantage in and of itself is enough to raise eyebrows among some competitors, even going as far as to argue that pads are capable of the same thing and therefore should be held under similar scrutiny. But it would be somewhat outrageous to ban the peripheral that comes with the console the game is released on, and I also do not believe that this is where the now over decade-long heated debates that the usage of the hitbox is cheating originate from, or at least I don't think it should be. The fighting game community has always had one motto, if none other: adapt or die. If your opponents are using characters, exploits, or devices with advantages over your own, you are essentially expected to do the same, and it's no one's fault but your own if you get left in the dust. It's this mentality that leads to things like Zero and Virgil running Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, as well as the mentality that led to the creation of the hitbox in the first place, with Dustin Huffer himself saying, "When people are hungry enough, they'll do anything to improve, even reinvent the wheel. Stick in this case, but you get the idea. The hitbox was born through the salty struggles of competition." While you may look down upon or want to fight against this mindset, you'd be hard-pressed to claim that it's ineffective.
The top players are winning. A lot of the reason is because they know who the best characters are and they go to them. Just pick a top tier. You want to win, yo? Pick a fucking top tier.
No matter how hard you train and how many counter strategies you feel you've mastered, those with more objective advantages than yourself will more than likely get one over on you, so it's difficult to argue in favor of banning hitboxes based on this return to neutral advantage alone. But there is still a discussion to be had here. While its return to neutral time isn't exactly an unfair advantage that much different from other innate advantages that other controllers have on their own, where the debate begins to grow somewhat complicated is when we begin to discuss maneuvers and strategies that are completely impossible on arcade sticks and pads. To briefly recap, SOCD cleaning, or simultaneous opposing cardinal directions, prevents two opposite inputs from being inputted at the same time. Controllers and games themselves can both implement SOCD cleaning as a means to combat exploits that originate from pressing two opposite directions at the same time. The reason why using the proper neutral mode of SOCD cleaning is important is because without it, there are game-breaking exploits that arcade stick and most pad players are not physically capable of, like walking forward and instantly blocking both directions at the same time, or being able to instantly charge-based attacks by never having to let go of back, because pressing left and right on a hitbox will release the last input if using last input priority SOCD, as discovered shortly after the Huffer brothers began selling their own hitboxes by a vanilla Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Hulk player at DWF Fight Club.
I have no idea why this happened. You press it once, the normal comes out, you press it twice, or you spam it. I don't know. I don't know why that happened. Now, another thing that happens is when you don't have to hold back, you don't have to let go of back to perform a charge move. Now, I can't 100% say that this is true, but the speed at which I can perform charge moves using this method, I don't think you actually ever lose charge, no matter what you do, as long as you hold back. So notice how fast I can do the Hulk's giveaway. could at home. I'm sorry about that. We're here at the FW Fight Club. That just seems a little bit too fast. I don't know, but it just seems a little too fast. I'm gonna bring in Chun-Li.
Now, as I just mentioned, these types of simultaneous opposite inputs can be cleaned up by both the hardware of the hitbox itself and the software of the game. It's just that games both around and before this time were not developed with the concept of a controller that can hold both opposing input directions at the same time in mind. As they were sent out to arcades with levers and put on console, the assumption was that most players were simply using the directional pad. But as the hitbox began to grow in popularity, something would have to be done, with some games like Tekken 7 or even something like Fightcade implementing SOCD cleaning into their software. But not every game does this, and this is where the hitbox on the hardware end has to utilize the proper neutral version of SOCD, where pressing both opposing directions at the same time always equals neutral. The problem arises when people say, nah, and use other input modes of SOCD that are undoubtedly cheating, like last input priority. I initially had an entire section planned out for this video talking about my experience with the hitbox, as I've been using one over the course of several weeks now, but then I came to a realization that brought me to the decision to scrap it. I myself and anyone else who plays with me will tell you that I am nowhere close to a high or high intermediate level player. I enjoy the culture and experience of playing these games, but I am not even remotely comparable to anyone who plays these games for a living at the biggest events in the world, and therefore my experience and what I'm capable of with the hitbox is ultimately irrelevant. Nobody cares or should care about the average Joe cheating with his weird hitbox and his desolate den of depravity, nor is the hitbox a supernatural miracle worker that'll turn you into a pro overnight, like some believe it to be. But the true issue and debate begins when taking into account that high-level competitors who use the hitbox could potentially be cheating or using exploits when entering major tournaments. The obvious answer on paper might appear to be checking everyone's leverless controllers to make sure the proper neutral SOCD cleaning is being used when they enter, but this is not only impractical once you realize that thousands upon thousands of people enter these open bracket tournaments, but also completely undoable considering that some of these tournaments are also online, making it practically impossible to properly regulate, which inevitably brings us to as demonstrated by the fact that hitbox players and even hitbox themselves were finding new exploits when Capcom banned up plus down equals up with the Capcom Pro Tour 2023 rule change, attempting to police the hitbox by only restricting certain aspects of it doesn't really do anything to stop it, with new strategies adapting to these restrictions being discovered and abused. The hitbox team and Huffer Brothers themselves have also never exactly been shy about advertising the hitbox based on its competitive advantages or leaning into the more questionable benefits of the leverless controller scheme in their demonstration videos.
Damn, you can't even hear all the buttons going. 3-frame Hadoken every time. Exploit that shit.
Alongside Daigo himself outright stating the hitbox has an advantage over other players.
正直まあフードとかとよく話してんだけど、ヒットボックスが禁止になったら禁止になったでいいなっていう。だからなんか対抗手段っていうか本当にそれが許された時に。打つ手がないっていうのはマジで寒いなっていう。まあどっちに転んでもいいようにやるっていう感じだよね。普通に考えてだいぶ本当に使いこなしたらだいぶ有利になるから、まあ禁止になる可能性は全然あるなっていう。
The shortened return to neutral time isn't exactly an unfair advantage that warrants a ban, but being able to use the last input priority or press two opposing directions at the same time is. And while Capcom or any other tournament organizer can declare that a specific setting is banned, actually enforcing this ban by checking every hitbox is both impractical and impossible in major tournaments with thousands upon thousands of participants, or even online tournaments. There is a correct way to use the hitbox by using the alternative SOCD mode that means left plus right and up plus down equals neutral. However, as I just stated, making sure that everyone participating with the hitbox is actually utilizing this neutral setting is both impractical and impossible. And tournament organizers have a hard enough time already making sure all the equipment is working properly and everyone is in the proper place for their matches on time without having to check everyone's controllers on top of it. With all this in mind, I don't think it is at all an unfair statement to say that, yes, the hitbox should be banned. But just how realistic is banning the hitbox this late in the game over 10 years after its inception? Well, many pros now use the hitbox and are sponsored by the company Hitbox themselves, who are also sponsoring major community events, and while the professional players will undoubtedly just go back to their arcade sticks or what they were using before, I have a feeling that neither tournament organizers or the FGC at large would want to lose Hitbox supporting the community and these events. If this sounds eerily similar to lobbying and politics, that's because it kind of is, but the FGC is so small and niche that it needs the support from within the community to thrive, because we are also working under the assumption that all of the players who use the hitbox will be perfectly fine with it being banned and will just go back to a pad or arcade stick. There is a chance, however minute, that both pro players as well as the average tournament goer alike who use hitbox may begin to boycott these community events where the hitbox is banned, with others following suit. And even if they don't attend or fund these events directly, viewers at home who use hitboxes themselves may also boycott by not tuning into streams for these tournaments that also support it, potentially leading to a severe drop in numbers that could threaten the existence of many of these events that the community loves. There are also players who switch controller type due to specific ailments that do not allow them to use traditional arcade sticks or pads, and this is unfortunate as well as entirely fair. These people should not be forbidden from competing and shouldn't be punished because of the actual bad actors who do cheat on a hitbox. This leaves us in an awkward position where, yes, the hitbox can be used properly, but people can also use it to cheat, which is practically impossible to properly regulate, which on paper sounds like an instant ban, but it is also unfeasible to ban it. There's only so much you could do or say in this situation, and if it bothers you that much, you'd be better off just using a hitbox rather than drive yourself insane attempting to convince everyone that a now sizable portion of the community should have their controllers banned, which leads to less tournament attendees, losing the Hitbox company as a sponsor supporting community events, and also somewhat discriminates against players who can't use either an arcade stick or a pad due to issues like carpal tunnel or arthritis in the hands, each of these only hurting the fighting game community in the long run. I find the "if you can't beat 'em, join 'em" mindset to be just as disheartening as the next guy, but this is where the issue currently stands, and all we can really do is keep advocating and pushing developers to fundamentally ingrain the proper neutral SOCD cleaning into the software end of their games to combat any sort of cheating for the most part, instead of weirdly specific regulations that don't change anything or could even make it worse. I ended my previous arcade stick video by discussing whether or not you should buy an arcade stick, but I'm not sure whether or not I would suggest the hitbox. I don't really feel that good with it despite playing with it for weeks now, and someone else could experience an even steeper learning curve. If you already play on a keyboard or if you have some sort of physical ailment, then it may suit you, but if you are already comfortable on a stick or pad, then I don't really think it's necessary to switch. I myself am an arcade stick user and more than likely always will be, but I'm interested to hear the perspective of others who purely use a hitbox either out of personal preference or because they are physically unable to use another controller type, as this is a genuine issue within the community that requires everyone to speak up. Well, almost everyone.
If you argue that hitbox player can walk block faster / easier, the same argument goes to parry than input move situation.
As always, this video took quite a bit of research digging deep into fighting game community history and how controlling these games works on a fundamental level. So like this video if you enjoyed or learned something new. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, what your personal experience with the hitbox is, or what your take is on whether or not it should be banned, as I love hearing from you all. Subscribe for free to be notified of my future projects. Thank you all for watching, and have a blessed day.